My name is Grant Townsend. I am 68 years old, and for most of my life, people have described me with one word: steady. Not brilliant, not remarkable, just steady. My son-in-law, Marcus Holloway, had a different way of putting it. Last spring, inside a packed university hall at my granddaughter Lily's college graduation, Marcus leaned toward a group of his colleagues, men who had never met me and had no reason to question anything he said, and told them, loud enough for me to hear every word, that I had never amounted to much. My family heard it. Lily's friends heard it. The man sitting beside me heard it. And for one long, breathless moment, I thought about every way I could respond. Then the dean stepped to the podium. To understand what happened next, I have to take you back to the spring of 2004, the year Marcus walked into my daughter's life and, little by little, started walking me out of it. Before Marcus, our life was simple, ordinary, and honest. My wife Dorothy and I raised our daughter Diane in a 3-bedroom house on Clover Street in Dayton, Ohio. Dorothy fixed industrial machinery for a living. I taught second grade at Riverside Elementary for 32 years. We were not wealthy people. We did not take vacations to places that required passports, but we did not carry debt either, and we never went to bed wondering whether the lights would still be on in the morning. Dorothy had a habit I loved. Every month, on the first Friday without fail, she would pull a small envelope from the drawer beside the refrigerator, tuck a little cash inside, and set it in an old tin on the kitchen shelf. It was not retirement savings. It was not for bills. It was just an envelope. I asked her once what she was saving for, and she told me, something worth it. I'll know it when I see it. She never told me what that something was. Dorothy passed away 9 years ago from pancreatic cancer, 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end. After she was gone, the tin stayed on the shelf. I kept putting envelopes into it every first Friday because it was the one ritual of hers I could still touch. Diane was our only child. She was stubborn in the good way, the way that means a person will stand up for something they believe in. When she was 20, I remember looking across the kitchen table at her and thinking she would need someone strong beside her. I meant that as a compliment. I did not understand yet that there are two kinds of strength. There is the kind that lifts you up, and there is the kind that holds you in place and calls it protection. The morning Diane brought Marcus home for the first time, I started learning the difference. He shook my hand in the doorway of our house with a firm grip and direct eye contact, the kind of handshake that feels rehearsed. He was 43 at the time, a regional sales director for a construction supply company, 12 years older than Diane. He wore a sport coat on a Tuesday, which felt less like clothing and more like a performance. Diane was glowing. I tried to feel what she felt. At their wedding in 2004, I stood up to say a few words. Nothing long. Just a father's version of welcome and gratitude. I was about halfway through when Marcus stepped forward, put a hand briefly on my shoulder, and said to the room, "What Grant is trying to say is..." Then he finished my sentence for me. He smiled when he said it. Everyone laughed. Even Diane laughed. I stood there and smiled too. Because what do you do with a moment like that in public? Nothing. You smile, you sit down, and you file it away. He did it again at Easter. Then again at Diane's birthday dinner. Then again at a barbecue the following summer. Always the same gentle interruption. Always dressed up as helpfulness. Always followed by that measured smile. The message was never loud enough to call out directly. That was the genius of it. He never raised his voice at me. He never needed to. Diane thought he was decisive and confident. She had always been drawn to people who seemed certain about things. I told myself I was being too sensitive. I told myself every family has an adjustment period. There was one thing Marcus said at their wedding reception, after the formal toasts and after the dancing had started, that I never forgot. I will come back to that. But first, there was Lily. Lily came into the world on a rainy October morning in 2003, 7 months before the wedding. Diane called me from the hospital at 4 in the morning. I drove there in my bathrobe with my coat pulled over it, and I did not care how I looked. For the first few years, I was there 3 mornings a week. Diane worked early shifts at a property management office. Marcus left before 7, so it was me and Lily at the kitchen table. Me with my coffee. Her with whatever small disaster she had created using cereal and a spoon. That was enough for me. I taught her to read with the same book I had used in my classroom for 20 years, the one with the worn cover and the blue dog on the front. I sat beside her at the kitchen table at 11 o'clock on school nights, when the chemistry problems made no sense. I never pretended to be better at chemistry than I was. What I knew how to do was stay. Marcus never forbade Lily from coming to see me. He was smarter than that. He just made it inconvenient in small ways. Grandpa was tired. She did not need the noise. Was she not a little old to spend Saturday at Grandpa's house? Lily ignored him with the easy confidence of someone who had not yet learned to doubt herself. She came anyway. She was the only person in that family who looked at me the way Dorothy used to, like I was fully there. When Lily told me she wanted to study education and become a teacher, she said it quietly, almost like a secret. I did not make a speech. I just squeezed her hand. Then, in the fall of 2022, Marcus brought up the house. He came on a Tuesday afternoon without calling first. I heard the car pull in and watched through the kitchen window as he walked up the front path in his work clothes. Coat on, tie loosened. The posture of a man carrying an agenda he had decided to call a conversation. I made coffee. I let him talk. He sat at my kitchen table and used phrases like, estate planning considerations, the realities of aging alone, and what was practical at this stage of life. He had clearly rehearsed. He explained that it might make sense for Diane to hold power of attorney, just as a safeguard, nothing drastic, so someone could help manage the property if anything happened to me. The property, not my home, the property. I listened to all of it. I did not interrupt. When he finished, I set down my coffee cup and asked him one question. What is the name of the attorney you are recommending? He paused. It was a fraction of a second, maybe less, but it was there. Then he told me he had a few contacts and could put me in touch. I said that was all right because I had my own. He smiled and said, Of course, Grant. After he left, I called Ed Ferris, an old friend of mine, a retired family law attorney who had drafted our will in 1989 and had been updating it every few years since. I told him what Marcus had said, word for word. Ed was quiet on the phone for a moment. Then he told me to come in Thursday so we could get everything locked up tight. I did not tell Diane, not yet. I needed to understand the shape of what I was dealing with before I said anything to my daughter. That afternoon, I realized Marcus was more patient than I had given him credit for. He would wait, he would find another opening. What I did not know was that he had already found one, and it was 6 months away, sitting on a university stage in a blue cap and gown. This is what 20 years of it looked like in pieces. Christmas 2019. I called Diane on the 23rd to confirm dinner. She said yes, 6 o'clock, same as always. I arrived at 6:15 to a dining room being cleared, and a dishwasher already running. Marcus met me at the door with the expression of a man who seemed genuinely puzzled. He asked whether I had gotten the text. They had moved dinner up. He said he had assumed Diane told me. Then he glanced behind him. Diane appeared in the hallway and said she was sorry. She said he thought he had sent it. We stood there, the three of us, inside a particular kind of silence. Lily's 18th birthday, 2021. I had written something I wanted to say. Nothing long, 2 paragraphs. Marcus went first. He spoke for 20 minutes and showed a slideshow he had assembled from photos I had never seen. By the time he finished, the cake was being cut and the moment had passed. Afterward, he leaned toward me and said quietly, Next time, remind me to leave you more time. As if the time had been his to allocate. Then there was a family meeting in the spring of 2022, my retirement accounts, an insurance beneficiary update. The attorney had a question directed at me. Before I could answer, Marcus said, The family has agreed on this, and gave the answer himself. I looked at Diane. She was looking at her hands. After the Tuesday visit with the power of attorney proposal, my phone calls with Diane changed in quality. She still called, but there was a hesitation in her voice, a careful choosing of words that reminded me of someone speaking near a person who was listening. I kept all of it in a plain composition notebook in the kitchen drawer. Not for a lawsuit, not for revenge. Just so I knew I was not imagining it. The decision that changed everything came out of an ordinary Tuesday night. It was October 2018, during a fall parent information session at the University of Dayton, which Lily had just started attending. I went because Lily asked me to. Diane and Marcus had a prior commitment. I drove the 40 minutes alone and sat in the third row of a lecture hall that smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee. Before the program began, a young woman gave a short speech. She was a junior, the first person in her family to attend any college. She talked about what it had cost, not only in money, though it had cost money, but in the particular loneliness of being the one who went somewhere no one in your family had a map for. She said a scholarship had changed the math, not just financially. It had told her she was worth the investment. I sat with that for a long time on the drive home. Dorothy's voice was in my head the whole way. Something worth it. I'll know it when I see it. The following January, I called the university's development office. No announcement, no press. I set up a recurring annual gift to the First Generation Student Fund, sustainable on a retired teacher's income, and I told them 2 things. My name could be used in recognition materials according to their standard process, and I did not want anyone in my family to know. That second part was not about secrecy, it was about ownership. This was mine and Dorothy's. It belonged to the tin on the shelf, the first Fridays, and the 32 years I had spent in that classroom. By 2022, my cumulative contributions had crossed the threshold for the donor recognition wall in Westfield Hall. A letter came from the university. I read it at the kitchen table alone and put it in the drawer. I did not look at the wall until the morning of Lily's graduation. Lily called me on a Thursday night in March of 2023. She had been filling out an application for the university's graduation scholarship, a small merit award for students in the College of Education. One section asked applicants to check whether they had any family connection to named donors at the university to avoid conflicts of interest. She was clicking through the donor database when she found it. Grant A. Townsend, founding donor. First Generation Student Fund. She called me without finishing the application. I picked up on the second ring and knew something had happened from the first sound of her breathing. She said, Grandpa. Just that word. Then quiet. I said, You found it. She asked, Since when? I told her. 2019. By then, she was crying, not loudly. It was the quiet kind of crying, the the kind a person does when something finally makes sense that they did not know needed explaining. She asked why I had not told them. I thought about how to answer honestly. Then I told her it was not a family thing. It was mine and her grandmother's. We stayed on the phone for a while without talking. That was something Lily and I had always been able to do. Sit in silence without it meaning anything was wrong. Before we hung up, she asked whether she should mention it to her parents. I told her there was no need. She said okay. Then she told me there were 47 students in the fund so far. I had not known the exact number. I wrote it down on the back of an envelope. Then Lily told me she was going to do something really embarrassing at graduation, just so I knew. I told her not to do anything embarrassing. She laughed and hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a few minutes after that, looking at the number on the envelope, 47. Then I put it in the calls from Diane shifted again in early 2024. It was subtle at first. A change in vocabulary, a certain carefulness. She started using phrases I recognized as not quite hers, the practical reality of maintaining a property that size. What made sense financially going forward. She was smart enough and loving enough to feel the awkwardness of it, but she had been hearing those phrases at the dinner table long enough that they had gotten into her language the way songs do, without permission. I invited her to dinner. Just her. I said it in a way that made clear I meant it. She came on a Wednesday, slightly apprehensive. I did not ambush her. I made the chicken she had liked since childhood, and we talked about Lily and about a book Diane had been reading. I waited until the dishes were in the sink before I put Ed Ferris's folder on the table. I told her everything had been arranged. The house was in a living trust, the deed, the accounts, all of it. Ed had drafted the documents last spring. Nothing needed to be managed by anyone else. Then I paused and added that she could tell Marcus I appreciated his concern. Diane looked at the folder for a long moment. She did not pick it up. I told her she did not need to say anything. I only wanted her to know. She drove home that night, and I imagine she told him, because 2 days later Marcus called me directly. His voice was still calibrated, still pleasant, but something in the surface of it had thinned. He told me he just wanted to make sure I was being looked after. He said that was all this had ever been about. I told him I knew, and that I was being looked after. I thanked him. He did not call again after that. He went quiet, which was somehow more unsettling than anything he had said out loud. The night before Lily's graduation, Diane hosted a small dinner at their house. Lily's 2 closest friends came, along with a couple from the university program and a handful of Marcus's work colleagues who had driven in from Columbus. The house was lit up, the table was full, and from the outside it would have looked like a happy family celebrating something real. I sat next to Bob Keene, an old friend of mine. Bob had been at our kitchen table so often over the decades that Lily still called him Uncle Bob, even though they were not related. He was 71 by then and moved more slowly than he used to, but his eyes were the same. Marcus worked the room the way he always did at gatherings like that. A hand on a shoulder here, a laugh there, the fluent performance of a man who considered social situations a skill set. At one point, he told a story that ended with a punchline about retirement projects and people who thought puttering around the house counted as a legacy. He did not look at me when he said it. He did not need to. Bob's hand found mine under the table for just a moment. Lily sat close to me for most of the meal and did not say much. On her way to refill her glass, she squeezed my shoulder as she passed, something Dorothy used to do. When the evening ended and people were putting on coats, Marcus found me near the door and said warmly that they had saved a spot for me in the family section the next day, and that I did not need to worry about a thing. He had not saved me a spot. We both knew it. I told him I would find my way. I always did. I know some people understand exactly what that kind of life feels like. Maybe not at a graduation. Maybe not inside a house in Dayton. But at a table where someone else is managing the room and you are the person being managed. 20 years of it. Not dramatic scenes you can point to all at once. Just the slow, steady draining of the ground beneath your feet. The morning of graduation, I drove to the University of Dayton on my own, which was how I had always preferred to do things that mattered to me. I wore the navy jacket Dorothy had picked out for me years earlier. She had chosen it for a school board dinner and said it made me look like someone worth listening to. I had worn it to every important occasion since she passed because it still felt like her judgment settled across my shoulders. It fit me oddly by then. I had stopped caring about that some years before. I arrived 40 minutes early. The parking lot was already filling. Westfield Hall was a newer building on the south end of campus, a glass and stone combination that always struck me as trying very hard to look both modern and permanent at the same time. The lobby opened into a wide atrium, and on the far wall, lit by recessed track lighting, was the donor recognition display. I had seen it in a photograph on the university website when they sent the acknowledgement letter. I had not walked past it in person. I stopped. 3rd row, 2nd panel from the left. Grant A. Townsend, founding donor, First Generation Student Scholarship Fund. The letters were cut into brushed bronze. My name. Dorothy's Habit, 22 years of First Fridays. I stood there for a few seconds. Then I went inside and found my seat. 4th row, left aisle, beside the pillar. Bob was already there. He had 2 programs, one for him and one for me. I opened mine to the back page and found the section titled Recognition of Founding Donors, First Generation Scholarship Fund, 1 paragraph, 3 names. I folded the program and put it in my lap. The hall filled around us. Marcus arrived with Diane and a group of colleagues and took seats in the reserved family section near the front. He was laughing at something one of them had said. The ceremony opened with a processional, the faculty filing in with their regalia, then the dean's remarks about the class and its achievements. Standard material. The kind of thing you listen to at a low frequency while watching the faces of people you love. Then, during a short pause between the opening address and the provost's welcome, Marcus leaned toward his colleagues. There were 4 of them, men from his Columbus office, in blazers and sport coats. People who had no context for anything in that room except what Marcus chose to give them. One of them asked something. I could not hear the question. I could hear Marcus's answer. He half turned, tilted his head in my direction, and said, clearly enough that Bob heard it without straining, "That is Lily's grandfather, retired schoolteacher, honestly." Then came the small shrug. He never really amounted to much. His colleagues shifted in their seats. One of them made a sound that might have been a laugh. Marcus settled back, satisfied with whatever had been established. I did not turn my head. I looked at the stage. I was aware of Bob going very still beside me. I was aware of Diane 5 rows up, half turning at the sound of Marcus's voice, then deliberately turning away. I have thought about that moment many times since. What it cost her to look away, and what it would have cost her not to. I do not have a clean answer. What I know is that I sat in that folding chair with my hands in my lap and my program folded, and I felt clearly and completely that this was the last time. Whatever happened next, or did not happen, this was the last time I would sit in a room and be described by that man to people who had no reason to doubt him. Then Dean Albright stepped to the podium. She adjusted the microphone, glanced at her notes, and smiled at the room with the particular warmth of someone who had been doing this long enough to mean it. Before the conferral of degrees began, she said the university wanted to take a moment to honor the people who helped make the day possible. She explained that the year marked the 5th anniversary of the First Generation Student Scholarship Fund, a program that had supported 47 students over 5 years. Students who were the first in their families to attend a 4-year university. She spoke about what first generation meant in practice. Being the one in your family without a roadmap. Being the one who had to figure out things other people had simply inherited. I was not looking at Marcus. I was looking at the stage, but I was aware of him the way a person is aware of weather. The particular atmospheric pressure of someone about to understand something he cannot take back. Beside him, one of his colleagues shifted. Someone opened a program. In the student section, somewhere in the sea of blue caps, Lily was beginning to smile. I could not see her face clearly from where I sat. I knew the smile anyway. I had watched it build since she was 3 years old. Dean Albright paused and looked down at her notes. Bob beside me had not moved. The room held its own quiet for one long second, the kind of quiet that happens just before something is said aloud that rearranges the air in a room. Then Dean Albright said the First Generation Student Scholarship Fund had been established by a founding donor from right there in the Dayton community, a man who had spent 32 years in the classroom before he ever put his name on a wall. She looked up, and she said my name. Grant A. Townsend. 2 words, a name. Mine. The room did what rooms do when something unexpected happens in a formal setting. It shifted. Not a gasp. Not an outburst. A collective recalibration. The sound of several hundred people reorienting at once, heads turned. Some people were looking for a face to attach the name to. Others, the ones sitting closer to me, had already found it. I sat still with my hands in my lap, my program folded, and Dorothy's jacket on my shoulders. Dean Albright continued. She said I was a retired educator with 32 years in the Dayton school system. She said my contributions had funded 47 scholarships since 2019. She thanked me on behalf of the university for believing in the students who came to that place without a family blueprint for how to do it. The applause was warm and real, the kind that starts slowly because people are still processing, then builds when they catch up to themselves. In the student section, Lily stood up. She was the first person on her feet. She found me across the room without any trouble. She had always been able to find me in a crowd. She stood there with her cap slightly crooked and her hands coming together in a clean, deliberate clap. Not a performance. A statement. Other students stood, then some of the families. I looked at Lily and nodded once. I did not stand. There was no need. Bob put his hand over mine on the armrest and kept it there. Neither of us said anything because there was nothing useful to say. Some moments need witnesses more than they need commentary. 20 feet away, Marcus Holloway had gone completely still. I did not look at his face. Not yet. I kept my eyes on my granddaughter. The applause faded. Dean Albright moved on to the next item in the program. The ceremony continued, but the air in the room had changed the way it does after a window opens. Not dramatically, just differently. The colleague sitting directly beside Marcus, the one who had almost laughed, had a program open on his knee. He was looking at it. Then he looked at Marcus. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Marcus stared at the stage. His jaw was set. His hands rested on his thighs with a deliberateness that told me he was aware of every person within 10 feet of him. It was the posture of a man working very hard to appear unaffected. Diane had turned in her seat. I felt her looking at me from across the room, and I let her look. From that distance and angle, her face was difficult to read. but I had known that face for 42 years. It was not anger. It was not even embarrassment exactly. It was the expression of someone who had been carrying one version of a story, only to realize that version no longer held together. The degrees were conferred row by row. When Lily crossed the stage to receive her diploma, she shook Dean Albright's hand with both of hers, which was not the standard way to do it and was completely correct. After the ceremony, as the hall began to empty into the afternoon light, one of Marcus's colleagues, the one who had not laughed and had been quiet throughout, introduced himself to me near the aisle. He called me Mr. Townsend and told me his daughter was a first-generation student at Ohio State. Then he paused and thanked me for what I had done. He did not glance at Marcus when he said it. He did not have to. The afternoon was bright and slightly cool. Good graduation weather. The kind that makes photographs look like they were planned. Families spread across the lawn outside Westfield Hall. Lily was somewhere in the middle of it, robes still on, being photographed with friends. Diane was with her. Marcus stood at the edge of the group with his phone in his hand, not looking at it. He found me near the stone path that led back to the parking lot. Bob had gone to get the car. We were as close to alone as two people can be in a crowd. Marcus came up beside me and said nothing for a moment. Then he told me he had not known about the scholarship program. I told him I knew he had not. He paused, then started to say something about what he had said earlier and the way it had come across. I turned to look at him directly, which I had not done in some years, and said his name. I told him I was not asking for an apology. He could keep it. He blinked. He was used to being the one who decided when conversations ended. I told him what I wanted him to understand was that the house was not a conversation anymore. The trust was locked. Ed Ferris had the documents. There was nothing to manage and nothing to negotiate. If that changed for any reason, he would hear from Ed directly. I let that settle. Then I told him Lily was graduating that day, and I was going to take a photograph with my granddaughter. I walked past him. I did not look back to see his expression, because I had spent enough years trying to read it. I already knew everything I needed to know about what Marcus Holloway looked like when he had run out of moves. Bob was waiting at the curb with the car door open. After the photographs, Lily pulled me aside. She physically took my hand and towed me through the crowd to a quieter stretch of lawn near the building's side entrance, where the noise of the celebration softened into the background. We stood together for a moment. Then Lily looked behind me. I turned, and Diane was walking toward us. Marcus was not with her. She stopped a few feet away, and looked at me the way people look when they have rehearsed something and forgotten all of it. She called me Dad, took a breath, and asked when I had started. I told her 2019. She pressed her lips together. Her eyes went red, but she did not cry. Diane had always cried privately. Even as a child, she waited until she was alone. She told me she had not known. I told her I knew she had not. Then she asked why I had not told her. I thought about how honest to be. I decided to be completely honest. I told her it was not about the family. It was about her mother and me. Then I stopped and chose the next words carefully. I told her that, at the time, I had not been sure it would stay mine if too many people knew about it. She understood what I meant. The color in her face shifted. She started to apologize, not only for that moment, but for the things she should have seen and the things she should have said. I touched her arm and told her that day was Lily's day. I told her we should be there for it. She nodded, not quite trusting her voice. Behind her, Bob Keene had drifted into earshot. He looked at Diane with the particular gentleness of someone who had known her since she was small, and told her that her mother used to say I was the most principled man she had ever known. He said Dorothy said it every time he saw her. Diane covered her mouth with her hand and nodded again, harder this time. Ed Ferris had already drafted the letter before graduation. I had asked him to have it ready, not because I knew exactly what would happen at the ceremony, but because I had known for 2 years that a moment was coming when the conversation about the house would need to be ended cleanly, in writing, without room for interpretation. The letter went out on the Monday, following graduation, to both Marcus and Diane's address. It was 3 paragraphs. The first confirmed that the estate and all associated real property were held in an irrevocable living trust, administered by my direction alone, with a named successor trustee who was not a member of the immediate family. The second confirmed that no power of attorney had been granted, and that the terms of the trust did not permit it to be assigned. The third noted that any future inquiries regarding the trust should be directed to Ed's office. That was all it said. Marcus called my cell on Wednesday. I let it ring. He sent a text saying he thought we should talk because a lot had happened. I typed back that all questions about the trust should go through Ed Ferris and that Ed's number was in the letter. Marcus did not respond after that. I know from Diane, who called me the following week, in a different voice than she had used in years, quieter and more her own, that Marcus had gone still in the house in a way she had not seen before. Not angry, just recalculating. I felt no satisfaction in it. I want to be clear about that. Watching someone reckon with the limits of their own maneuvering is not satisfying. It is simply what happens when a door closes all the way. The door was closed. That was enough. Lily came on a Sunday afternoon the following weekend, the way she had been doing since she was 15 and had decided on her own that Sunday afternoons belonged to the two of us. She came through the back door without knocking, the way she always had. I had the kettle on. She sat in Dorothy's chair at the kitchen table and pulled her knees up the way she had done since she was a child, a habit that would probably stay with her for life. We drank tea and talked about her plans. She had a job offer from a school district in Columbus, primary grades starting in August. I told her Dorothy would have driven 45 minutes each way just to be in the classroom next door. Then Lily asked if she could ask me something. I told her she was going to ask whether I had planned it. She smiled and asked if I had. I thought about it honestly. I knew my name was in the program. I had seen it listed on the back page when Bob gave me my copy, so I knew Dean Albright was going to say it at some point during the ceremony. I set my cup down and told Lily I had not known Marcus was going to say what he said in the 60 seconds before that happened. Lily was quiet. I told her I had not arranged anything. I had just lived long enough. She turned her head and looked at the shelf above the stove where Dorothy's tin had sat for as long as she had been alive. It was older now. The lid was slightly dented, and the pattern had worn off one side. Lily asked whether I was still putting envelopes in it. I told her I did it every first Friday. She asked whether there was something else I was saving for. I told her there was another fund I wanted to get to the next tier, probably in one more year. She looked at me the way Dorothy used to when she was proud of something and did not have words for it. Then she simply said, "Okay." We finished our tea. Diane called 3 weeks after graduation on a Saturday morning. The first thing I noticed was the quiet on her end of the line. No television in the background, no second set of footsteps in another room. She was alone in a way she had not been when calling me for years. She told me she wanted to come see me. Just her. I told her to come Tuesday and said I would make the chicken. She came. She arrived at 5 o'clock, and the house smelled right. We moved around the kitchen the way we always had when she was growing up, not talking much. Each of us knowing where things were, the comfortable choreography of people who had been cooking in the same space their whole lives. We ate. We talked about Lily's new job, about a neighbor's garden that was getting out of hand, and about a book Diane had been trying to finish for 2 months. None of it was the real conversation, and we both knew it, but neither of us rushed. After I put the dishes in the sink, Diane sat back in her chair and looked at the table for a moment. Then she told me she owed me an apology, a real one, not the kind she had been giving me for years, where she apologized for a situation without naming what the situation actually was. I sat down across from her. She said she had let him do it. Not on purpose, but she had let it happen anyway, every time, and that was on her. I told her she had been managing something very difficult. She said that was kind of me, but it was not the whole answer. I told her no, it was not. We sat with that. It was uncomfortable, and it was necessary, and it was the most honest conversation we had had in 15 years. Finally, she asked whether we were okay. I told her we were working on it, and that was better than okay. I am telling this story now from my kitchen on a Friday evening. The tin is on the shelf where it has always been. This month's envelope is already inside it. I put it there this morning, the way I have every first Friday for as long as I can remember. The number in the fund now is 53. I know because the university sends a letter each fall, and I read it at this table before putting it in the drawer. Marcus has not said another word to me. I do not expect him to. We exist now in a careful silence that is nothing like the silence I used to keep. This one has a shape to it, a perimeter. It asks nothing from me. Diane calls on Wednesdays now. Her voice is more like her own voice than it has been in years. We do not talk about Marcus on those calls. We talk about Lily, and about the house, and about whatever book she is reading. The conversation is not everything it should be yet, but it is more than it was, and it is real, which is the part that matters. Lily calls on Sundays. She settled into her classroom, 2nd grade, 22 students, and a broken projector she had to fix herself on the 3rd day. She told me last week that she ordered the same book I used with her when she was small, the one with the blue dog on the cover. I did not say anything for a moment after she told me. I am not going to say everything turned out beautifully. It did not. You do not get back what 20 years of being diminished costs. You get what comes after. What came after for me was 53 students who had someone believe in them. Dorothy would have called that worth it. I do too. I have been thinking about the difference between patience and surrender. A lot of people told me over the years that I was being patient. I am not sure that was the right word. I think what I was doing was refusing to become someone I did not want to be. I held on to the house. I held on to Dorothy's tin. I held on to Lily's hand when she needed someone steady beside her. And in the end, when Marcus told a room full of people I had never amounted to much, I did not have to defend my life with anger. The truth was already there, printed in bronze, written in a university program, and carried forward in the lives of students I may never meet. Some victories do not arrive with shouting. Some arrive when a name is read aloud, and the room finally understands what was there all along.